Welcome to Super Talk, the podcast that scratches your superhero itch. Just two suburban dads nerding out over superhero stuff on the small screen and the big. Buckle up, people. Enjoy the ride. Professor, like a gentleman, you ready, sir?
Let's go.
All right. In 3.
Welcome to Super Talk, the weekly podcast dedicated to news and reviews of comic book media on the big and small screen. This is episode 128. I'm your host, Brian Professor Pettis, and with me, as always, my illustrious co-host, Titanium Tony Estrella.
Professor, we got a long one, so let's get into it.
All right, well, you got your thinking cap on, so thank God.
Right. That's right.
You know, and because this is going to require a lot of mashing of brain cells, everything we got to get into this week.
My Stranger Things thinking cap.
You know, but this is the week we've been looking forward to, right? This is the week that we've said we've got 3 episodes to review in 1 week, and there are 3 episodes of 3 shows we're really happy to be reviewing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is a really good week for us. All right, well, let's jump into it. First, we want to thank the listeners that bring the show to our patrons. Patreon.com/supertalk if you want to join the patronship and support the show directly. We really appreciate the listeners out there that are part of our patronship. So patreon.com/supertalk if you'd like to join the patronship.
Thank you.
Let's jump into our review section, and we want to review what we've been reviewing all season, and that's the finale of Gen V, Episode 8, dropped this past week. And I've got some interesting thoughts about this. I definitely want to get your perspective because you sent me a text. You're like, wow, it's amazing. It's everything. I want to get your thoughts of how you thought the finale was.
I thought it was really good. I mean, I think that Gen V is hitting on all cylinders still. The expectations of that finale were so immense because some of the episodes before it were so insane. But like story-wise, I think they wrapped up a lot of plot holes, and they
didn't though.
Well, they wrapped up the main storylines. They absolutely wrapped those up,
and no surprise how they wrapped it up either.
Really good. I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was not the best episode of the season for sure.
It was the shortest episode of the season.
But
number one, it was the shortest episode. It did seem, and my immediate response to you when you sent out your text, I was like, I'm not sure about this episode. It seemed a little rushed and frantic to me. And I think the length of the episode led to that a little bit because it seemed like everything was happening all at once and it really was over very quickly. And I'm like, wow, that was really fast.
Yeah.
And so that was my initial feedback. I love this show. Yeah. I love these characters. The way that it fits into the boys' universe is perfect. We got introduced.
The way they set up season 2, I think continuing with these characters, I think they did a really good job of that. Like now, I want to see these characters again. I really want to see what happens to them in season 2.
They drew some lines. I mean, there's some clear factions now amongst the student body, right? They definitely drew some lines. And
spoilers. Well, let's get into this. Spoilers real quick. If you haven't seen it, we're going to spoil a bunch of shit. So just FYI.
And hopefully, if you're a fan of the show, you have seen it because you've not been sitting around waiting to watch this episode.
If you haven't seen it, you absolutely should.
But so the end, and one of the things that we discussed last week after the end of episode 7, we saw Cate had, used her powers to have Dean Shetty kill herself in front of the rest of the Scooby Gang. And you and I had this theory that she had projected that amongst the other students. And this was going to be an illusion.
Last time pushing,
It was an illusion, and that Shetty had kind of convinced her to get all of the kids off of her case so she could, kind of, the two of them could go off and do what they needed to do. Literally within the first 3 minutes of the episode, it was like, oh, well, she's dead.
Yeah.
Dead as a doornail, no question, she's gone. Yeah. Bleeding on the floor. They're like, all the answers we wanted are right here on the floor bleeding.
Yeah.
Right? And Cate and Sam...
They could still pull that off, to be honest with you.
I guess, but
I think it would
at this
be,
point in time,
it
that's
would be
weird.
a stretch.
Too weird.
It would be a stretch.
I would have thought if they were going to do it, they were going to do it this episode, and that was one of my disappointments. And again, we talked about this in episode 7, that it was a very odd transition from the conversation that Cate obviously wanted to confront Shetty one-on-one and had asked everybody else to leave so she could do that.
Right.
She confronted her one-on-one, and it seemed to us that Dean Shetty had convinced Cate that they were on the same side and that she had her best interest at heart and that they needed to work together and stay together because she saw her as a daughter, the daughter that she lost, and all these other things. And it seemed like Cate believed her. And then we transition to the scene when all the kids come back to Shetty's house, and Shetty's got a knife to her throat, and Kate's like, "Don't stop me. You can't stop me from doing this." Yeah. And it's like, what happened? Like, we didn't see... Like, again, my thought process last week was, if Cate had held her hands and said, "Now tell me the real truth," or "Let's get to the bottom of the story," like forced it upon her, and then we saw what happened, then it would make sense. But it seemed like they had come to some kind of understanding.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think that your theory isn't dead yet. But I tell me this. Did you feel the same way when you just said it was rushed? And I kind of felt it was rushed too. Do you think they rushed it a lot to get to their big reveal, which was Homelander flying in and doing what he did? I mean, I felt like that was their big... I felt like they put so much weight on that moment that they forgot about to get there.
While I was disappointed in a few ways they handled things this episode, I wasn't surprised at all by anything that happened and anything they did. It was in the true vein of the Boys television show, shock and awe. Vaught's at the bottom of all this, and they're going to do it the way they want to no matter what. So I wasn't surprised by any of it. I just, again, it seemed like it went from 0 to 100 miles an hour within like 7 minutes of the show.
Yeah.
Because Cate and Sam go rushing off going, "We need to go free those kids that are stuck in the woods." And all the other kids are like, "Well, we're not going to be part of that." And they're like, "Well, we're doing it anyway." Sam's like, "We're doing it anyway."
Yeah.
And they're all looking at each other like, "Well, okay, that's kind of strange." And that's why I was like, that's kind of strange that they would go off and do that. And the rest of the kids were like, "Well, we got to kind of find a way to stop them. Yeah. We got to get our own answers. We kind of
like 20 minutes later after they had a head start.
Yeah. They let them run off, and then Cate and Sam and the scene of Cate and Sam freeing all the kids in the woods was kind of cool. Yeah. I mean, Sam walks in there and just punches a guy straight in the face and like basically rips his brain out. He's got brain matter all over his hands, and she's telling guards to eat their own hands and everything. And it was kind of cool. And then we find out that all those kids that have been trapped down there, one guy is Gungam style still a thing, and so he'd been down there for at least 10 years. But they're like, basically, she kind of influences them all to kind of, "Hey, you've been down here, time to go make people pay for what they did to you." And it seemed like they were going after the non-soups that were in charge of this, right? So one of the guys that runs out of there, would go up to somebody and say, "Are you a soup?" And she says no, and he basically puts his hand on her face and melts her face. Yeah. And it's like, "Oh, that was quick."
Typical Boys style. A little face melting never hurt.
There were some pretty awesome death scenes, gory scenes. Like the really interesting scene with the guy who was like the social media influencer for the school.
Yeah.
Real dirtbag. You could kind of tell he was a dirtbag from when he was in the previous episodes. But he had this little device, and this one girl starts running up, who has electrical powers, runs up to him, and he uses his device to make the neutralizer with some supersonic sound.
Turns the sound on in the whole school.
And then he basically had this little disc that he could put it in her mouth, and then he turned it up to super solid, and then it blew her head off.
Right.
And then we saw Cate actually got him, said, "Hey, we're gonna make a social media. We're gonna make a post on social media." And she takes his phone and films himself putting the thing in his mouth and then blowing his own head off with it. That was pretty gory.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what you expect, right? At that show. So I liked it a lot. I thought it was a great close. I thought it was a great finish. I felt like it was rushed, like you said, to get to that Homelander bit. Which
well,
is
Ashley
powerful.
was there, so Ashley.
That's what I'm saying. It
and
tied
the whole
directly into
board
the
of
next
directors
season.
from Vought come to the school because of what's going on. Then they said we need to build back up this, the school's image. Well, we're going to take one of the members of the school and promote them into the 7. So they're going through all the different, portfolios of each of the students.
They verified that the invisible kid was Translucent Sun.
Yeah, maybe, hey, and they're like, no, he's way too strange. He's anything like his dad. He's got way too many fetishes, right?
Yeah.
But then at one point in time, when all this violence is happening to the school, they're like shut in this conference room, and they're obviously scared to hell that the Supes are going to come kill them, and including the director who was teaching a class and ends up running into the room, and he reminds everybody of the little interlude that Ashley and he had in a bathroom stall of a boys episode. But she basically was like, "Oh my God, call Vought, get us a helicopter, get Homelander here. This is ridiculous. We need to end this." And she calls Marie on the phone and says, "Marie, you're going to get promoted into the 7 if you can
get us out of here.
Get us out of here and kill these kids that are doing this."
Right.
And so Marie's like, "Oh, okay." And we do see some really cool fight scenes. I mean, Marie uses her powers in some interesting ways. Translucent Sun. Cate influences Translucent Sun.
I did not see that coming.
To attack Marie. Marie's like, "I got this." And she used her powers to kind of sense his heartbeat.
And his blood.
And she basically knocks him unconscious because of that. That was really cool. Yeah. We saw a really good fight scene between Jordan and Sam. And then ultimately Sam and... who's the other kid? The magnetic polarity's son.
Oh.
Andre and Sam were fighting each other, and Andre uses his magnetic powers to get a shock stick and subdue Sam. But you could see it really took a toll on him because he passed out as well. Marie saves, I guess, all the helicopter comes in to save all the Vought people, and Cate has one of the Supes jump up and basically, destroy the helicopter, and Andre, is able to get it down on the ground.
Safely, yeah.
Yeah. And then all the Vought people are running in and hide in the helicopter, and one of the other Supes is running after him. And, Marie uses her, blood powers to kind of just throw all her daggers.
She actually pulls blood from the dead people around her and uses it.
It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. And then Homelander shows up, to your point. That was the big, surprise reveal that Homelander shows up and he's looking around, typical Homelander style. He's like, and he looks at Marie and, they're like, "Thank God you're here. You can help us stop all this." And he's like, "Do you like attacking your own kind?"
Yeah.
He
goes, "What kind of animal are you? Are you the type that attacks your own kind?"
And she's like, and he's like, no. You're not allowed to talk. And he basically just zaps her.
I thought she was dead. She takes a blast from Homelander.
Well, then they immediately transition to the aftermath of this, and the 4 kids, Andre, Cate, Marie, and Little Cricket, are all in some cell. We assume it's Vought Tower. There's
hospital cell.
They're in hospital beds and hospital gowns. Marie wakes up and Andre's like, "Man, you took that blast like a champ." So obviously her powers or her abilities kind of helped her absorb the blast from Homelander. I thought she was gone too.
Yeah. What's your theory? Like, where are they? You think they're in Vought Tower?
Yeah.
Could they be trapped in Cate's mind?
I mean, that's a stretch. Yeah. I mean, if this whole episode was really
there's no windows, there's no doors to this facility.
There's the only door is a hatch that's at the top of the room, and it's obviously shut off. They can't get to it, or they can't open it. But they're trapped in there. There is a TV in their room, and they're seeing the news story. And the news has been twisted by Vought to say, these 4 individuals were responsible for all the violence on campus yesterday. And thankfully, the new, heroes of Godolkin were able, and it was Cate and Sam were the heroes. Right. The ones who started the whole violence were now being painted as heroes. Oh, and the other great scene was Cate was trying to get to Andre, or Jordan was trying to get to Jordan to get Jordan to
fight
for them. And Marie used her powers to basically explode Cate's arm.
Oh,
it was awesome.
That was shocking. I didn't see that coming at all. That was great.
That was great. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So look, if this episode is being used to set up kind of as a lead into the next season of The Boys. It did that.
We got an end credit scene with Butcher kind of scanning the woods.
He goes into the woods.
Yeah, he goes into the woods, and now he is aware of the virus. You assume he's aware of the virus, and he's looking for clues.
He's aware of the woods and what was going on there and everything else.
So that storyline will continue in season 4 for The Boys.
So big question for you, Titanium. Do we see these characters on the next season of The Boys? Do any of them make a cameo? Does this storyline feed directly into what's going on in the next Boys season?
I think we see them. I think they make cameos, but I don't think the main storyline will focus on the Boys characters. Yeah, I don't think they'll share the Boys at all.
I thought the Butcher end credit scene was... I loved it, of course. I love Butcher. He's a great character. I thought it was a little strange in the fact that the last time we saw Butcher, he's basically dying. Because the temp V that he was taking to give himself power so he could fight... Was killing him. And he was basically like, look, my time's up, and he's like, I'm dying. And obviously he's not dead, so... I can't wait for The Boys. I mean, look, that, from my perspective, is probably one of the best comic book-based television series ever. And it has never failed to deliver. It's just been on point every season, and I can't wait for the next season.
If you had to compare Gen V to Loki this season, season 2 Loki and Gen V, which one would you say is better?
Which one did I enjoy them more?
Yeah.
Probably Gen V, for sure. I think Loki's much more, which we'll get into the review of that episode. I think it's much more cerebral. It's a much more thinking show and kind of a, more of a mystery. And I think that we're figuring more out about that. Gen V was just like a character-driven, fun story with some crazy boy shit.
Can't take your eyes off that train wreck. I mean, it's just... crazy.
It delivered on everything we were hoping it would.
Oh, absolutely.
From content, from tone, from character development. I mean, they just... Amazon gets it, man. I mean, look...
And for not having a roadmap of a comic to do the show, this was all written based off The Boys as a...
They didn't use predefined characters, predefined stories, drawing stories from the comics. I mean, The Boys series definitely drew from stories that were in the comic books for sure. And they've picked and choose which ones they like, Herogasm and all kind of others that they wanted. But this was all brand new.
Oh.
They killed it. And we're going to talk about another Amazon Prime series here this episode that is killing it as well. And Amazon just gets it. I'm sorry, they just get it. And I think we're hoping Disney gets back on track. And I think, by and large, Loki Season 2 has been a success. I don't think it's a resounding one like the first series was, but it's been a success. So let's just jump into that. So we'll put a pin in Gen V. Can't wait for Season 2. Can't wait for the next season of The Boys to see kind of what happens. Yeah, so we're just really happy with that series. All right, Episode 5, Loki Season 2. I think this episode, from my perspective, answered a lot of questions. Definitely confirmed a lot of theories that we had about what was going on.
Yeah.
And set up the finale very well. I thought this was exactly what we needed to kind of figure out what the finale is going to be.
I felt like this episode was a giant question for me.
Really?
Yeah, I felt like
I got more answers than questions.
I have, it's a question like, how is this going to end?
Right.
Like, what direction is this going to go? So it was more, and I'm anticipating the finale now more than ever, because after the big cliffhanger where the loom explodes, like, what's going to happen then? And then they kind of filled that in. They gave you backstories of where they came from. They kind of answered some things, and they solved one big issue that they'll probably use. Obviously, they're using it now. Is that he now has control of his time slipping. It's back. His time slipping is back, and now he can kind of somewhat control it. There was some definite Infinity War kind of vibes when they all kind of got spaghettified. But I think it's like it created a giant question like, how's this going to end? Yeah.
I think the biggest question that was answered for me, at least, was, and again, I had shared this theory very early on in the season. I was under the impression that this entire season was one big, massive time loop. That it was kind of like a Groundhog Day. I mean, we talked about that last episode. Yeah. That this seems like, to me, this is like a Groundhog Day kind of thing. Like they're going to be forced to relive and redo all of this over and over and over again. Till they get it right. And that seems like that's the direction they're moving. That this episode, we'll kind of just talk about what happened in this episode. Loki, at the end of last episode, episode 4, the loom blows up and big white light, and we figure everything's over. Well, then he wakes up and he's still alive and he's in the TVA like 15 minutes earlier.
Yeah.
And we get to see him see himself, and then he sees himself again, and so he's basically time slipping again into this little loop. And then he ends up time slipping back into the past in a couple different places. Yeah. And the funny part, not funny, but very interesting part is he ends up slipping into different time periods and different branch realities where every member of the team, or his friends, what he calls his friends later, he goes to their basically genesis or their branch timeline where they were found originally and brought to the TVA. I think this answers the question: how did these all these characters get brought to the TVA in the first place? Now we know. Yeah. It was by Loki during this period, and this massive loop and time slipping loop that he's been in was originally how they got to the TVA. We find Mobius, we find B-15, we find, who's the analyst guy that was the Alcatraz prisoner, what's his name? I can't remember his character's name. We find him. We find Sylvie back in, and all of them don't know who he is, never seen him before, have never heard of the TVA. This is their origin, where they originally were in this branch timeline. So they are all variants. They are all in their own branch timeline. We got that confirmed. But he meets them kind of for the first time, and the whole scenes with Mobius working in the power sports store, selling ATVs and jet skis and wave runners. Oh, so funny. He tries to sell one out of his garage. I mean, it was just hysterical. And again, you've mentioned this a million times, Titanium. The chemistry between the two of them is
off the charts.
So good.
That's what makes the show, to be honest with you. It really does. Yeah, I thought it was good. I thought it was really, but again, for me, this episode, not the greatest episode. I thought the last episode was much stronger. For me, this episode really kind of made me like question, like, how is this going to end? And that's what I'm waiting for.
I thought the best part of this episode was when he found Obi, Ouroboros, who wasn't Ouroboros at the time. Find out that he's a scientist who's a science fiction writer, but he's a theoretical physicist or whatever. He's a real scientist, but he likes writing science fiction, and he's placing his books into these bookstores, buying them, trying to drum up demand for his own book. But we find him before he becomes Ouroboros, and find out that he is a brilliant scientist. Loki's he believes Loki's like, oh yeah, I believe you're from another universe. I totally believe. But here's how it would happen. And then Loki gives him a copy of the TVA guidebook that he wrote, which inspires him to build the first time pad.
Yeah.
And literally, like, Loki time slips over to another place with one of the other characters, and with Mobius actually, and Ouroboros just shows up through a time door. He's like, oh my god, you're able to build one of those. He says, how you did it that quickly? He goes, that quickly? It took me a year and a half. Yeah. So I finally found you. But it was great. I mean, but bringing them all together. But then we find out that these realities that they're in are slowly spaghettifying. They're slowly being destroyed. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, he finds Sylvie, who's the only one who remembers him, the only one who recognizes him. And she's like, I don't want to have anything to do with the TVA. It can burn to the ground as far as I'm concerned. Go back and do whatever you need to do. And then she goes back to her house, or she goes to a record store, and that's the scenes we've seen in the trailer where everything in the record store starts spaghettifying, and she uses her temp pad to get the hell out of there. Yeah. And she realizes there's nowhere else to go. She would have been happy to continue to live in that time stream and just work at McDonald's the rest of her life, but
they border on confusion.
Oh yeah.
It's very confusing. When you deal with time and time travel and time slipping and this and that, it's very confusing. It's hard to stay with the show where it is currently.
Tony, you mentioned this so many episodes ago. That was your biggest fear when Marvel decided to come up with this multiverse saga. Your biggest fear was it's going to be very confusing. People aren't going to get it. They're not going to understand it.
I mean, for us that grew up reading the comics and understand the multiverse, because we've had years and years of comics that have kind of explained it and touched on it and kind of walked us through it. For somebody that loves the characters, loves figures, and they love the comic book characters and the stories, it kind of is even still confusing. But for the novice fans that just like these new characters, to have them thrown into the Kang world, the Council of Kang, and all the multiverses,
even Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness was confusing for a lot of people. So yeah, I mean, that's been our big fear, and I think that we're getting a little bit of that now. But I think what the show is setting up, to answer your question, is I do think now at the end of the episode, Loki figures out. So Ouroboros is trying to teach Loki to control his time slipping. He says, science is about the what and the why, or the what and the how. He says, but science fiction is about the why. And he said, you got to figure out the why. And then Loki realizes that the thing that draws him to this purpose is his friends. And that's where he gathers all of his friends in one room. And then they all become spaghettified. And he's like, oh God, this is the end. And then he time slips again to 10 minutes earlier. And he's like, wait a minute, I think I figured it out. It's my friends that are the reason why I can do. And so he realizes he can control it.
That was a huge
and
reveal.
The end of the episode, he times it back to the moment right before.
We see
Victor Timely tries to walk out to fix the device. So we feel like next episode is going to be them redoing that whole process of trying to fix the loom over and over and over again until they figure out what they need to do and why they need to do it. And I think that's where we're going to go with this. And we're going to find out. I think the big reveal is going to be Loki was as instrumental to setting up the TVA as He Who Remains was.
Right.
If not as instrumental, probably more instrumental, because he was the one who brought the first version of He Who Remains to the TVA that ended up becoming, So I think we're going to find all that out, that Loki really was the one who kind of set all this thing up to begin with, and this massive loop that he's been in. And
does he end up running the TVA?
That's a great question. I think that there's a future for this version of Loki outside of this series. Right? I think we're going to see him and Thor be reunited at some point in time, whether it's in Kang Dynasty or Secret Wars or whatever. And containing
if Kang
him,
Dynasty even happens.
And containing him within the TVA kind of limits that. So I think it's highly possible that Loki, this version of Loki, gets dropped off in the sacred timeline or our timeline at some point in time at the end of this show, basically to kind of resume his life as Loki.
Interesting.
And that would kind of then set up
after Thanos snapped his neck.
Yeah, because now this is it's a variant that's been returned to the
sacred
timeline. So, and that's and that would kind of bring credence to the thing. Well, we're gods, but no more resurrections this time. Well, this is a way you can kind of get resurrected. And that's one of the rules of comic books, right? Is that until nobody's ever really truly dead, because there's variants and multiverse and all this other stuff. You never know what can happen.
That is true.
Right.
Excellent.
So,
looking forward to that finale. We're going to dig into it.
All right. Well, let's jump into some news from this week. We did get a full trailer from Marvel earlier late last week for the Echo series. So this series is we got a full trailer for Echo. Did see Kingpin, obviously very instrumental. He actually narrates the entire trailer, which is Vincent D'Onofrio as the Kingpin is
off the charts.
So good. It's just so perfect. He loves the character
in there.
Yeah, we see Daredevil in some of the trailer scenes. I really don't know exactly. It seems like they're going to be diving into her kind of Indian heritage and her childhood powers, with the
Kingpin. Get into a little bit of her powers, but
there's obviously some kind of
That's why I don't
threat.
call it a trailer.
Right.
I mean, it was more like a teaser, like a long teaser.
Very long teaser.
Because we don't have any idea of what the story is about. We don't have any idea what
who's the bad guy? Who's the anti? I mean, is it the Kingpin or is it
no
how does Daredevil get involved?
Nothing. It was almost like
It was just it was scenes,
like a scene from John Wick.
It was scenes, little clips of scenes voiced over by the Kingpin. That's pretty much what it was.
And to be honest with you, the tone of this, the brutality in this, it's rated
TVMA, which is basically rated R for
rated
television.
R.
Right.
Yeah, I loved it. I thought that was the best part about it.
Well, I mean, the first part of the trailer, we see young Echo come out of school talking to somebody. She wants to get ice cream from the ice cream man, and he's like, I don't understand what you're saying, like basically making fun of her because she's deaf.
Her away.
Yeah, and Kingpin's in the car, and he gets out and beats the living shit out of him, and he's got blood all over. He's wearing a white suit, and he's got blood all over his white suit, and he's like looking at her saying, "Don't be afraid."
Don't be afraid.
But
brutal.
yeah,
it's gonna be Punisher brutal, and I like that. I like that aspect about it. Not because I'm sadistic, but I just think that tone needs to stay with those characters.
Well, here's what we learned. 3 really important things we learned from this trailer. All episodes of this series are dropping at the same time on January 10th on Disney+. So they are. We did hear this rumor before. They confirmed we're getting all of the entire Echo series dropping simultaneously on January 10th on Disney+. It will be rated TVMA, so it will not be pulling punches on the gore and the violence and everything else.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, at the end of the trailer, they're saying, make sure you have your TVMA settings on Disney Plus to unlock the series. Like, if you don't have them on, you won't be able to watch it. And the other big thing is they announced that they're releasing this under a new label at Disney Plus called Marvel Spotlight.
Very similar to Marvel special presentations. The long versions, like Werewolf by Night, was under the label.
But this is completely different. So the special presentations are going to be...
It is, but it's a different label, like a special presentation.
Like special presentation was a label.
Yeah.
But the Marvel Spotlight label is designed... So what Marvel confirmed is that Marvel Spotlight is designed to be a self-contained entity that can be enjoyed without worrying about or wondering how it fits into the larger Marvel universe.
Correct.
Which is huge. Because if you watch Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness and you didn't watch WandaVision, you were confused as to why Wanda was evil all of a sudden.
Correct.
You had no idea because you didn't watch WandaVision, right? So what they're saying is you can step into the Echo series, know nothing about Echo, know nothing about the Kingpin, know nothing about Daredevil other than that they're characters, and you'll learn about them through watching the series, and you'll be able to enjoy it as a self-contained series without ever wondering where they were before or how it fits into the larger multiverse.
Yeah.
Which is great. I think that is really smart on Marvel's part.
It's a label also that contains street level.
Well, they said it's focusing on character-driven.
Yeah.
This particular one is street level, but it's character-driven stories that are self-contained, right? But so could we see a Marvel spotlight on Ghost Rider? Could we see a Marvel spotlight on Nova? Potentially.
Yeah.
Right? And not have to worry about how they fit into the larger MCU and other stories. I think that's a really smart move by their part. Because
we have said before that the special presentations is a great way to introduce a character. Not have these whole series comes out. Like a special presentation might have been great for Miss Marvel to introduce She-Hulk. They didn't need these series and multiple episodes to introduce those characters.
Seriously, Titanium, if they would have done a special presentation for She-Hulk, and the first episode of She-Hulk, remember where they had the whole training montage with her and Bruce and everything else, did the finale, and just made that a 1 hour long special presentation, we would have been...
I would have enjoyed it a hell of a lot more.
So much better off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Agreed.
And they would have been able to accomplish everything they needed to in one episode, right? We didn't need all the crazy twerking with, Stallion or whatever her name.
Megan
Thee Stallion. Megan Thee... we didn't need all that. So, yeah. Great things that we got from there. I can't say, and again, we've heard about problems they've had with this series. They've had to cut a lot of the content. They did a lot of rewrites. They did a lot of reshoots. and how that we know that this series is going to lead into Daredevil Born Again and what they're doing on the street level, kind of, character driven stuff. Is there a future for this character in Marvel? I don't know. Will we see Echo and Daredevil? I don't know. But I think that this could be successful if it's done the right way. And so, look, we're going to be able to binge it in one day if we want to.
Yeah, excellent. I'm a little more excited about this episode. I was not. I was lukewarm.
The fact it's TVMA makes you more excited.
Exactly. Even though John Wick did it better. But I still think that there's something about this. And Marvel might give us enough Easter eggs in this to keep us moving forward with this. At least keep our attention.
And again, we know Daredevil Born Again's been delayed because of the rewrites and the start over from scratch, kind of the way that they're redoing this. So I think to keep our kind of palate, a little bit interested in what's going on in that kind of character driven side of Marvel, I think it's really good.
Nice.
So. Some interesting news. Internet scoopster Daniel RPK, he's great. His track record is fantastic. He has traditionally been had his ear to the ground and been very accurate on knowing when trailers are going to be released. Like when we're going to get the first Marvels trailer, we're going to get the first Thor: Love and Thunder trailer. He knows exactly when they're going to drop, almost to the day. So on his Patreon a couple days ago, he announced that Sony would be releasing a trailer for Madam Web within the next couple of days. And we didn't get one yesterday. Monday Night Football's tonight. I have a feeling that teaser trailer is going to drop tonight or first thing tomorrow morning, because Tuesdays have been a trailer release date for a lot of studios on Tuesday morning.
And I know they're releasing another Marvel's trailer during Monday Night Football. I mean, I've seen the whole film. They've released so many clips, so many different trailers. It's almost like there's
what could they show you right now that would get you really excited?
Well, Kevin Feige kind of did some twisting at the very end. I think that out of desperation, they're throwing in. I think we're going to get mutants. I think there's going to be some kind of reference or something to X-Men in either a teaser, an end credit scene, or some kind of reference to that. So I think we're going to get some pretty big cameos, whether it's Deadpool or Wolverine and Deadpool together.
Well, again, I shared this theory with you, Titanium. I believe, so we know that some of the plot of this movie centers around, that we see Monica Rambeau and Captain Marvel touching kind of something they see in space. Like, it looks like one of those gates that the Guardians of the Galaxy use to traverse the universe, and they're touching them. They're like something, and that's how their powers get out of whack. I believe there is kind of a collision or an incursion is a big portion of this movie's plot, and the incursion is responsible for some of the things that are happening in the movie. And I believe they're going to use this incursion to explain how the Fox universe collides with and merges with the MCU universe.
Something to that effect. I'm
and
sure.
if it's not, they're missing an opportunity, and I'm not going to be very interested.
We're not. It's probably one of the first. No, I think we've done a couple of other movies where we haven't seen it opening night. This is probably going to be one of the few movies that we do not see opening night. We'll see it the weekend of, but we won't see it opening night. It's tracking some really dismal numbers. We're gonna see it. We're gonna review it, and we're gonna give it an open mind. I'm gonna go in. I'm lukewarm on this. Always have been. And none of these clips or anything has gotten me so excited that I want to rush out and see it the night before. I mean, a pretty cool fight scene that they released, but then again, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 fight scene was basically like, here, hold my beer. Because it just wasn't that good compared to Guardians of the Galaxy 3 fight scene. But I think this movie, I hope it surprises us, and I think they're really going to desperately try to entice more people to see it once it gets out of the end credit scene. And I think they're going to use mutants to do that.
Look, there are no excuses. This movie has almost nothing to compete against.
Yeah.
Almost nothing. There's nothing in the theater right now that everybody's talking about. There's nothing in the theater everybody's like, oh my God, it's dominating the box office.
Pre-sales are tracking less than
But there's nothing now.
Flash?
And there's nothing coming out for a couple of weeks either.
Less than Black Adam?
I know. I'm just saying there's no excuses here. If this movie does not do well, it's not because they were forced out of the theater by some movie that was like, it's not like Barbie 2 is coming out this weekend or something, you know?
The fact that people are desperately saying, oh, well, the director left in post-production to start her other film and didn't follow through. And I'm like, most people do that. Most people, once they have that direction, they don't really...
They are making a lot of excuses already, which I don't like. But again... We're trying to keep an open mind here because
Absolutely.
we love Marvel. We want this to... If this movie is good, we will give it all the credit it deserves for being good. If it does the things we want it to do, we will give it all that credit. You and I just have a feeling, just based on the characters that are in the movie and the story of the movie and the villain, it just we already are trepidatious about what might happen and might occur.
Great word.
But anyway,
yes, sir.
move on. Some details about... So we've talked about the disaster that was the Blade movie for several months now. We knew that they had a script. Mahershala Ali basically threatened to leave the project and, not do it because it was so horrible. They fired the writers. They said, we're going to have to start over from scratch. Production was delayed, indefinitely until they finish it.
2 or 3 directors.
Yeah, it's been a nightmare. And we got some details this week about what was the nightmare. And it was really you had mentioned some of these details before, Titanium, that it was a story that was basically, there was a daughter of somebody, some character's daughter that Blade takes on as, and mentors. And then she's the one that everybody's focused around. And she's the key to like solving this big problem with some vampire issue or whatever, and there was like 2 fight scenes in the whole movie, and it was a female-driven story that had some underlying, female empowerment
lessons
message.
Of life. Yeah, lessons of life or something. And
there were no fight scenes in the movie. So there were 2 fight scenes. The one scene where Blade has to rescue the girl, and then there was like one other one, and it's like and so that was Mahershala. He was like, I'm done. I'm out.
Yeah.
And however, we know that the script has been rewritten. They are back on track. Again, filming was supposed to start this year in New Orleans and Atlanta, and was delayed by the writer's strike and the actor's strike.
And I felt like we knew it was going to be rated R. I felt
They announced it was going to be rated R
a while ago, right?
Yeah.
The new director has just come out and confirmed that it's rated R, but I don't think that's big news. I think. We
had surmised that they were going to have one character that was going to be in the movie was the character of Lilith, kind of the queen of demons, was going to be, and I think that that's still the case. But rumors now are that some character in the movie is going to be wielding the ebony blade.
Great.
Which ties into that end credit scene from Eternals where.
Kit
Harington's character, opens up the case that has the ebony blade in it. It's tied to his family, and we hear Mahershala Ali's voice in the background say,
"Are you sure you want to do that?
Yeah, sure you want to do that? Yeah."
I mean, please.
Yeah. So that
how do you have Kit Harington, who's the centerpiece of one of the greatest, most popular series, Game of Thrones, on television? How do you have him sitting on the bench? I don't understand it.
If the concept is we introduce what the ebony blade is and how dangerous it is, and then we introduce it into the MCU in the right way, and then when Kit Harington wields it, we kind of know what he's up against. That would be. I think it could be good.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm really excited for that.
And I think Blade's the place to do that.
Yeah. Again, this movie likely now to be maybe the first movie or the second movie we get in 2025. If they get back on track here after the strikes are over. We will see it in 2025 at some point in time, whether it's spring, summer, or fall. We'll definitely get it. But I think Mahershala Ali is a rock star. I think he could kill this character. Again, I'm very hopeful of what this movie could be, and I hope they take the right direction here.
Agreed.
So, last story real quick. And this one had a lot of traction this past week. There are way too many people talking about this now that Marvel is seriously considering dumping the Kang character in favor of Doctor Doom as they move forward into this multiverse saga. So you and I have talked about this several times, Titanium. The original Secret Wars comic book storyline centered around a character called the Beyonder who took all these heroes and villains from the Marvel Universe and put them on this planet called Battle World and made them fight against each other. And that was kind of the original Secret Wars. The thought process was that the Beyonder character may be in Secret Wars, but it would be a variant of Kang. And the Kang multiverse, the Kang Dynasty movie would be the Kang Council of Kangs defeating the Avengers and all of the characters in the MCU. And then they have to these other variants would have to band together and put together a team in Secret Wars to kind of defeat some variant of Kang. Well, now Marvel's like, with everything going on with the lack of success of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and the Kang character, the legal troubles with Jonathan Majors, they're like, you know what? We might just want to cut bait with Kang.
Yeah.
Maybe we do Kang Dynasty, but then we shift, or maybe we don't do Kang Dynasty. I think Kang Dynasty still right now is in the plans, but do they shift now or do they shift later? Into Doctor Doom. So in the second iteration of Secret Wars, the main antagonist in the Secret Wars storyline was God Emperor Doom. Doom ends up getting the powers of the Beyonder and it rules over Otherworld in the second iteration of Secret Wars. And they're thinking that now maybe introducing Doctor Doom earlier than later is probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Titanium, you and I have been on the same page with this forever.
Yeah.
He is probably the greatest Marvel villain ever.
Yep.
Ever. Across all of Marvel. And I'm talking about all of Spider-Man's villains, Thanos, all the villains you can ever think of. Doctor Doom is the best.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of ways, very similar to Submariner, there's enough good in him that makes you kind of side with him a little bit.
Right.
But most of him's bad.
Oh, no question. Yeah.
And, his intentions, the way he does things, he's very self-centered and egotistical and just
like that
a maniac.
The conflict within Thanos,
Yeah.
He understands that the universe as it is now is
Needs
eating
balance.
itself. It
Yeah.
needs balance. It's eating itself alive. And in order to sustain the universe, to continue moving forward, it needs balance. And there's some truth to that. And
Okay, we understand what you're saying, but how you're going about doing it,
brutal.
that's the problem,
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
We're just going to kill off half the
Absolutely.
universe.
So I've heard a couple of things, and I think Variety magazine wrote a brutal article about Marvel, just bashing Marvel. And they spilled a lot of secrets, and they spilled a lot of things going internally in Marvel and what's going on. And some of their take on this was, and I think Marvel's handled it very well with Jonathan Majors. I think they've been sitting on the sidelines, letting it play out.
I think this,
backing him.
Look, I think what they've done is, I'll say, a life lesson. Sometimes it's better to say nothing than it is to say
Correct.
anything.
That's right.
And they've just chosen to be quiet about
Yeah.
it. They haven't come out and publicly supported him and backed him, nor have they come out and distanced themselves from him or
Correct.
vilified him. They've basically been quiet, and sometimes that's the best thing in the world to do.
Absolutely. It leaves them two choices at the end of the day. You either pivot, which we hope they're going to pivot and go to Doctor Doom and that whole angle, or they recast him. And that's a very likely possibility. If they have this vision of Kang in the multiverse being their Phase 6, Phase 5, Phase 6, they could recast him. Now, nothing's official yet.
Well, but here's what recasting makes us ask a question. Is the problem Jonathan Majors? And if it is, recasting makes all the sense in the world. Or is the bigger problem the character and how that character is resonating with the audience and with the storyline?
Bing, 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 bing.
And
winner!
I think it's the latter. And
absolutely.
therefore, recasting does nothing. Even if you bring in, pick the greatest actor in the world to play this character. Who cares? If the character's not relevant or doesn't connect, it doesn't matter who you recast the character.
I understand that, but you're thinking logically. That's not what they're doing. They're giving us characters that no one wants. That a handful of top Marvel and Disney executives are saying, we need this character to represent Marvel and to have heroes, and nobody's looking for that. Give us the characters that are proven, that have decades of popularity and success in the comics. Give us those characters. Quit putting these great characters on the sidelines, and bring them to the forefront. Put them on the field. Let's see them play. That would make too much sense.
I just think the utter failure of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania to not only paint Kang as the villain that we should all care about, that everybody should be scared of, and one that could potentially have variants that we care about and should be scared of, was what alarmed them the most.
Yeah.
Had that movie, and everybody's, oh my God, Kang, and there's more of them? Oh my God.
Yeah.
You know, Loki said this during his series, just like, I want to stop He Who Remains and all of his variants. They're the worst ever. Well, the only reason I believe that is because you're saying it, Loki.
But he got his ass kicked by Ant-Man. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, if he had dominated in that movie, and that movie was like a Empire Strikes Back, where Kang won, and he came out on top.
If the movie ended like we thought it was going to end.
Thank you.
With Ant-Man and the Wasp trapped in the quantum realm and him victorious, then maybe you're like, okay, he got out.
That's interesting. Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then maybe we get a Fantastic Four movie where they're fighting against another variant of him somewhere else from some other timeline.
They scrape MODOK. They eliminate all of the Bill Murray scenes. Ridiculous. Unnecessary. And they kept the casting originally, the Cassie Lang casting.
These screeners who are watching these movies before they come out, how does it get past that? Because if you and I had seen that movie like 6 months before, I mean, whatever. It's the first cut. The first screeners are seeing it 4 months before it gets released. If we had seen that movie, how could we not have been critical?
Yeah. Oh. And listen, I like the movie, and I'll tell you why I like the movie, and I've been very honest about this. I like the movie for one big reason.
The only reason you like the movie.
I love Paul Rudd. I think he is amazing.
The movie was horrible. Paul Rudd is great.
I like Paul Rudd. I have a very hard time any movie that he's in. But I'm telling you, I said it. I thought that it was the Cassie Lang. She dialed in the performance. Bill Murray scenes unnecessary. MODOK was a fanfare thrown in there with bad CGI. And Kang wasn't that dominating, so...
Agreed. All right, let's move on to something we really want to talk about. Our topic of the week this week brought to us by our friends over at Studio GG Studios. Home of the main band, Corn on the Cob. And we're going to review the Season 2 premiere of Invincible on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
Are you not excited to talk about this?
You want my honest opinion?
Yeah. No, I want you to fake it for the audience. What do you mean, do I want your honest opinion?
I love Invincible. I was so looking forward to this episode. I thought it was too long. I thought there were a lot of dialogue scenes that put me to sleep. I'm not kidding. I really did. I was like...
Not enough action.
Maybe not enough action, and that when it was action packed,
I totally see where you're coming from.
You see what I'm saying? I thought it was too long, and I felt like there were some scenes that kind of I fell asleep in. Like, I'm so disinterested in this. I understand they have to build on this story. I think they did a phenomenal job explaining the multiverse and the way that happened. I thought that was great, but the action scenes were too far spread out, and it was
so. I'm gonna defend this in two ways.
Okay.
First way, impossible to live up to episode 1 of season 1 and what that was and how it came about.
Yeah.
So episode 1 of season 1 was, I would say, 92% of it was exactly what you described of episode 1, season 1. Him working at, the burger place, and all of a sudden he can throw a trash can up into the air, and he's got his superpowers, and all of a sudden he gets a suit, and his dad's really happy because now he's a superhero, and all this other stuff, and if you rewatch episode 1 of season 1, I bet you would say I have the same exact feelings I have right now until you get to that last 4 minutes of that episode, when Omni-Man shows up and kills the Guardians of the Globe, and then you're like, oh, snap.
Yeah.
And so what I'll say is, you can't live up to that. That was the shock and awe of... Because I told you this. You were watching this last year, and you're like, oh my God, you got to watch this. It's so good. And my son was watching it, and he's like, Dad, you got to watch this. It's really good. I'm like, okay, I'll look at it. And I was watching the first episode. I'm like, okay, it's just like any other superhero thing.
Right.
It's animated. It's exactly what I would expect. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And that hooked me for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
And that's what made it so good. So you're never going to equal that. So what I'm saying about episode 1, season 2, you're never going to equal that. Here's what I think this episode did very well. It's been a year and a half, almost 2 years since we got Invincible season 1. It's been a year and a half. Mm-hmm. So it's been a long time. We've been waiting for this for a long time. They bridged the timeline between end of season 1 and now very well. And I think that's the part that you had a hard time getting through. It seemed like it took too long to kind of catch us up with what's he been doing since the end of season 1. His dad almost killed him, and how did it affect him? And Cecil doesn't trust him, and so he's not allowed to go on missions, but he's back at school, but he hates being at school. He wants to be a superhero. So I think that was the transition of... They wanted us to feel I think the feeling you have is exactly how he was feeling about his situation. Of like, let's get to it already. Come on, I just want to be a superhero. Yeah. And that's exactly what they were trying to make us feel. Was like, this sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, he should be out saving the world. He should be fighting these things, right?
I didn't think it sucked, but...
Yeah, no. But I'm saying the situation sucks.
Yeah.
I think... introducing us to the character of Angstrom Levy. So we know that this season is going to be 8 episodes. It's going to be 2 4-part sections. I believe this first 4-part section we're going to get. It's going to be 4 episodes. They'll take a break for a couple months. They'll come back with the last 4. I think this first 4-part episode is going to be centered around Angstrom Levy and that plot storyline of what's going on. So we got introduced to Angstrom Levy. He's got superpowers. He can open up doors into other dimensions, and so we get introduced into the multiverse of the Invincible comic book. Again, another multiverse. This could be confusing, right?
But that's what I'm saying. The way they explained it, I thought they did a very good job of dumbing it down and simplifying it.
They did.
Yeah.
So we get introduced to him. I thought the way they started this episode was great. They bring us to another alternate universe where Omni-Man and Invincible have teamed up.
Omni-Man convinced his son, Invincible, what he was doing, and he agrees to go with him.
And they team up to basically conquer Earth.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, you can either comply or you can die. It's basically, and we're going to make Earth better for you. And we get introduced to the Angstrom Levy character. And we find out that he can open up doors into other other universes, and we find out that he's taking all of his other versions of himself from those universes back to our universe, or the main universe. And we find out why later. But I thought that was brilliant to show what could happen in our universe if they do team up, right?
And he talks about other universes where it's
and what he different. Did, Adam Eve, he snaps her neck. And he's like, I didn't kill her. I snapped her neck, so I can come visit. I can go visit her, or we can talk, And this is so brutal. It was awesome. But we see what could happen here in our universe if this came to pass. And I think that's what they were trying to accomplish, was show us how different our version of Invincible is from these other versions. Yeah. That he really is a good guy, and he wants to be good. And that's the argument he has with Cecil. I'm not my father. I've got reasons why I want to be good. I could have joined him, but I didn't. And I think some of the arguments are that, the presence of his mother And the influence that his mother has on him in this universe is very different than the other universes, which is why he is who he is, and his friends as well. I mean, he has really good relationships and friendships, right? But I thought that was brilliant. And look, I love the Mauler twins. They're comedic relief.
Oh.
They're awesome characters.
Yeah.
I mean, they're brilliant scientists that know how to, and they're brutal, physical, I mean, they're just great villains. I mean, they are. And Angstrom Levy recruits them. He's like, look, I got this machine I'm building, and it's not working. I need you guys to fix it. And in exchange, I won't strand you on this alternate universe. Do you agree? They're like, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, we'll do this. They're fantastic. I love them. They're fantastic characters. But ultimately, we find out that the new Guardians of the Globe, the team that Invincible was on before, are still a team, but they're struggling. They bring the Immortal back to lead the new team. Yeah. We get introduced to a new character called Bulletproof, who we'll learn a bit more about here in the next couple episodes, I'm sure. He's pretty much a badass character as well. But they're in the Immortal is still very leery of Mark and his intentions. He's like, I've got my eye on you. Yeah, and believe me, I know you can turn to your dad at any moment.
Yeah.
But I love that whole side plot. But eventually we find out that Angstrom Levy's machine that he's building is he's going to take all these alternate versions of himself that he's taken from all these other universes and put him in this machine. He's going to transfer all of their knowledge into his brain so that he can learn everything that went wrong in their universe so he can prevent it from happening here.
Right.
And what happens, Cecil and the whole organization finds out that they know the Mauler twins have escaped from jail. They don't know where they are, but they find out where they are, and they send Invincible. You need to go stop them. And then he gets there, and Angstrom's in the machine. He's downloading all these memories, and he's like, no, you can't kill this version of Invincible because he's the only good one I've ever found. He's got to be saved. And the Mauler twins, we find out that there's these other versions from these other multiverses that come in, and they're all beating the crap out of Mark, and he's trying to stop. And then eventually Angstrom Levy's like, no, stop. And he takes the helmet off, and it causes this massive explosion, which kills everything except for Mark. And one of the Mauler twins is half burnt to shit, and the other one, the other half of him is okay. But Angstrom Levy now has been mutated. His brain has been mutated because of what he did. But I think this sets up that plot line of him getting back at what he did, he made him do, and being the villain of the first part of the series. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes. I just
want to say one other thing. I know Gen V's no longer around, but look, these series are being dropped on Fridays. But what all of the networks have done, Disney Plus included, they're dropping them at 9 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday. So I got to watch all 3 of these episodes last Thursday night, and I was so excited. Yeah. I mean, because I wanted to see them all. And I think that's just brilliant. Getting these into our hands earlier doesn't, I think, hurt them. I think it helps them. And it helps set the buzz up for people that are like, oh my God, I watched it last night. You got to watch it today. Oh my God, okay, yeah.
Gives you the weekend to...
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, I'm looking... This season, look, I think this series is not as good as The Boys, but I enjoy it as much. And I'm looking forward to this. I mean... The voice acting is amazing. The people they've cast in these roles are perfect for their characters. I mean, and it's just great. And again, I know a little bit about the comic book story that's driving some of this, so I kind of know where some of this goes. But I can't wait to see how it plays out on the show. So this is great. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to this series, and I hope it delivers like the first season.
I think it will. Hold faith, my friend. I think we'll be okay.
All right. I just first episode, I wasn't all in.
I got you.
Yeah.
I got you.
All right, Professor, let's ring the bell. Great show.
All right, well, that's it for us this week. We'll be back next week for more Super Talk. To get in touch with us on social media, hit us up via email, supertalkpodcast@outlook.com, or at supertalkpod on Twitter. Until then, stay super, everyone.
And we're out. Excellent. Like and subscribe. Thanks, YouTube.